Our Story Productions presents On the Road to Our Story, featuring a variety of programs that take a closer look at the organizations, businesses, and people located in the small communities of the Midwest. So get ready, for you're about to travel on the road to our story. Get ready, because now you can watch a full of fun daytime talk show that shares the latest and greatest news about the people, places, and events found all over our story country. The Women of Sweet Swine County, hosted by three sassy ladies that tell small town stories with big town attitude. Now, on this station and the web.
Hello, I'm Jason Howland. Welcome to Speaking of Health, a place to help you learn how to live a longer and healthier life. You or someone you know probably has felt a little blue or down in the dumps, especially during the winter season. Depression is very real, and it can be very serious for some people. And the shortened days and lack of sunlight as we are shut indoors during the winter, well, that can make the problem stand out even more. Our guest today to talk about seasonal affective disorder, also known as its acronym SAD, is Meg Stump. Meg is a behavioral health provider from Mayo Clinic Health System. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a licensed professional counselor. Meg, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Before we delve into the topic of seasonal affective disorder, let's start out by talking about depression in general. Is it as common as people, or more common than people might think?
I think it is. I think it's not only as common as people think, but probably more so. They are now determining that an estimated 19 million Americans have struggled with depression. It will likely affect 25% of women and at least 12% of men. Quite honestly, I think it's probably more like 25% of men, but only half of them are admitting to it.
And do you think that the diagnosis of depression, we're better able to diagnose it? People are more willing to come in to actually be diagnosed for depression, is why the number is growing too?
Depression is growing for reasons they don't really quite understand. From what I've read, in each generation since World War II, there's been almost a doubling of incidents of depression.
Wow.
So it's very much more prevalent today than it was in the times of our grandparents or great-grandparents. On the other hand, we are able to talk about it more. We're able to understand a little bit more about what's happening, and we have much better interventions for it now.
So what are some of the common signs of depression?
The most common signal for depression is a sense of feeling sad or irritable. But right up there among that is a loss of pleasure. And it's almost a sense of loss of joy in things that used to be really enjoyable to a person, which will strike them as very strange, as though there's been a great loss. Also, changes in sleep. For some people, they are sleeping more. For many, though, they find that they're not sleeping as well. They're waking several times. Very often, if they're not feeling well, then there'll be worried thoughts as well that sort of sneak in the middle of the night. Other signs of depression: feeling tired, feeling worthless or guilty, having a sense of fatigue. There's a sense of withdrawal, so that people as they become more irritable and sad, they're less likely to be involved with other people. And a concern can always be that for some people there'll be suicidal thoughts. And that's very much a function of depression. That comes with it, like a fever comes with the flu.
So what causes depression? Is it something that you're just born with, or is it caused by stress in your life?
It's not entirely known. We don't quite understand depression yet. You're certainly not born with it. And at times, people struggle with an enormous amount of stress and have no trouble with depression. At other times, they can run into a situation where there's loss and stress, and depression shows up as well. and it's not clear why it happens sometimes and not others. However, there's lots of studies about it, there's lots of talk about it, and the upside is that we're getting better at recognizing it, we're getting better about talking about it, and we have much better interventions available. And that includes antidepressant medications that simply weren't available to people 30 or 40 years ago.
Let's go on to seasonal affective disorder, what we talked about at the top of the show. Is SAD, is that a form of depression?
It very much is a form of depression, but it's very specific to, I almost wanted to say it was specific to Minnesota, but that's not true. But it's specific to a certain pattern that comes about when light begins to diminish for some people. And I use the example of a bear. Think about a bear in the fall. What happens? They get very irritable. They're getting grumpy. They start carb loading, and they get very sleepy. They really want to spend all their time eating and sleeping all the way through the winter. And for some people, they have very similar response, that when the light begins to diminish, they're more irritable, they want to eat more carbs, they want to sleep more. But the problem is that unlike bears, we have families, we have jobs, we have to engage with people, and if we simply give in to that urge to be grumpy and sleep, we'll become more and more depressed.
So with the winter season, is seasonal affective disorder, is it the lack of sunlight, the cold weather, the shortened days, is it a combination of all of that? Or?
It seems to be a physical response to the shortened days. In other words, there's less sunlight, but more than that, there's actually a pattern of shorter days, and that affects us very, very much. I know that it gets very complicated. The two pieces I kind of know is that as we lose sunlight, we see a drop in serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter that leaves us feeling kind of joyful and giddy. But we also see an increase in melatonin. People might recognize that as a neurotransmitter that encourages sleep and sleepiness. So if it's dark, we have more melatonin, we want to sleep more, and that discourages even further our ability to get serotonin.
So how do you diagnose someone with SAD?
Well, there needs to be a regular pattern of this kind of depression that falls within certain seasons. In other words, when the light's diminishing. And there have to be a number of symptoms, and it has to be causing a person a problem. Because let's say that a person is struggling a little bit but is handling it well. We don't want to be diagnosing them with a problem unless it really is a problem for them. For it to be SAD, you're going to see it several years in a row, so that there's going to be that regular pattern, and you're going to not have any problems with depression at other times of the year.
So Meg, besides moving south near the equator, which most of us probably aren't able to do or willing to do, how do you go about treating seasonal affective disorder?
The most important piece to remember is that we need to do things that are the opposite of that urge to stay in the dark and sleep. And that means light and exercise. So the best thing you can do is get outside, get a lot of light in the daytime, and if at all possible, exercise as well, which has an incredibly positive effect both for seasonal affective disorder as well as regular depression. So that can be the first thing. However, there's limits to how much I can recommend people to go outside and take a walk in this kind of weather.
Because it's so cold. Right.
Because it's like 0 today.
Yeah.
And therefore, you might also look at light therapy boxes, which are becoming much more available and reasonably priced, that can work to actually extend our body's perception of the length of the day, which becomes like moving toward the equator.
So explain these light therapy boxes to me. So I've never heard of this before. What is a light therapy box?
Okay. It is a full spectrum light that is put inside of a clear or translucent plastic box, so that rather than shining on something like a regular light would shine on a table. It's intended to shine on the person and therefore create that effect of having a longer day. So it's very commonly used where a person will have it in their home. They'll get up early. It's still dark out. They'll turn on the light therapy box and then read the newspaper, eat breakfast, etc., and thereby extend their perceived length of day by an hour or an hour and a half. Then they go on into the regular day, hopefully still get outside, get some exercise, and then in the evening, as the light diminishes, they're going to get sleepier and hopefully sleep well that night.
So it's basically sort of extending the daylight in their day, even though it's artificial daylight.
That's right.
And this is a matter of, it's not just a regular lamp that you can shine on yourself, right? It has to be a certain type of bulb.
The idea, I believe, is to use a full spectrum light and use it, a very bright light, and I don't know light measures very well, but these are extremely bright lights, and so that it begins to have the effect of truly being outside.
Now, I can just imagine that some of our viewers are thinking, a light therapy box. It sounds a little hokey to me, but these things actually help people, right?
They very much do. And it kind of proves out that what's happening is that our bodies are, and the bodies of some people are particularly sensitive to the length of day. So that as that light diminishes, there can be feelings of sadness and disinterest to the point where it's really worthwhile for them to seek some treatment, whether it be light therapy, talking to their provider about antidepressant medications, getting out more, exercise, all really are very helpful.
You mentioned counseling as well. Let's say I've been feeling very depressed for several months. I come to you at Mayo Clinic Health System for my first therapy appointment. What should I expect as a patient in therapy?
I think the first thing to be aware of is that, people are often encouraged to make a list of questions and things like that when they go to their regular doctor. That is not at all necessary when you go to a counselor. In fact, you don't have to worry about the questions or knowing the right thing to say. The counselor will take care of that. The first meeting is, you'll probably be getting a lot of questions on what's happening and how you're feeling, but the intention is to build a better sense of what's happening and what the problems are, and then secondly, you and the counselor together begin to work on a plan of information about the depression or whatever the problem is, as well as a plan of action, some interventions for you to take that will make a difference. The counselor is there in some ways like a friend, but also like a consultant, someone who knows a lot about behavioral issues.
It's like a friend you can talk to that has lots of expertise on whatever problem you're having.
That's right, and I actually have spoken to several people who said, I decided to come in because I didn't want to wear out my friends. There are some issues that going to someone who is not a friend and has to bear with it is a perfectly good thing to go do.
What are some ways to help prevent seasonal affective disorder during the winter? We talked about the light therapy box, but there's got to be some other just general things that you can do to help.
I think a lot of it is just awareness for what's going on. So that having an awareness that if a person is feeling kind of down and dull, that we can turn that around. And there's a lot of ways to do it. Number one is just making your environment sunnier and brighter. So open the blinds, sit closer to the window, get outside, and not only get outside, but become more active. Many times, we find that depression gets fed by some of our activities. And in fact, depression could be said to encourage activities that will leave us depressed. For example, not going out with friends and staying home and watching TV. When we want to change our environment, we want to do those things that depression would not approve of. So it's being social, being active, being in a bright environment. And if that is not really curing it, then realize that you may need to take a next step. Talk to a friend, talk to family members, talk to a professional. Because there are both medications and other therapies that can be very helpful.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we are all out of time, but I'd like to thank our guest today, Meg Stump, behavioral health provider from Mayo Clinic Health System, for joining us today on Speaking of Health. Thank you, Meg.
You're quite welcome. I enjoyed being here.
Have a great day, everyone, and be healthy.
Get ready, because our culinary expert and, dare we say, wine aficionado beyond belief, Betty Thompson, is preparing some tantalizing dishes for us on her show, Cooking It Up with Betty. In the midst of cooking, our dear old Betty does join her What's Cooking reporters traveling throughout our story country. Now, on this station and the web. There you have it, folks. One of our favorite stories. Now, let's take a look at another. Get ready, America, because you're about to see the best of the Cocklebur Morning Show, Sweet Swine County's #1 morning talk show. Our Story Productions presents the Cocklebur Morning Show, where we weed out the big stories from throughout Sweet Swine County with Bobby Ray and Sally Sue.
Thank you, and welcome to the Cocklebur Morning Show. And Bobby Ray, it's so good to have you back.
Well, let me tell you something, Sally Sue. It's great to be back. You know, tell me, Sally Sue, how did it work out with my assistant, Godfrey?
Your man, Godfrey?
Yeah, my man.
Oh,
Godfrey.
he did. Oh, wonderful.
Did he?
He was just. Oh, yes.
I knew that would,
he was just a natural at it.
I knew he would.
Yes,
I
did.
told him to prepare as the co-host in my
Oh,
place.
did you?
Oh,
And
yes.
how did he do that?
Well, I had him watch all the previous shows that we've done.
You had him really.
Yes.
Sit down and watch all 35 shows.
Well, can you think of any other way that he could do it? I can't think of it. Well, I knew that he would do a great job,
Yeah,
you know.
he did.
And I knew he would, yes.
Yeah, very nice.
You know, because when someone fills in for me, it's very important that they do a good job. And I think the best way to do that is by watching me, and it makes for great co-hosts.
Okay.
Yes.
That's great. Yes.
How about we bring out our guest today?
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, from the county of Kossuth, Iowa, in the town of Algona, please join me in welcoming Marvin Chickering.
Good to have you
It's
here.
fun to be here.
Oh.
Thanks for the invitation.
Yes. Now, you're from Algona, Iowa. Tell us about Algona.
It's a wonderful place to live and shop and eat. We have wonderful restaurants, and the diversity in the town is really beyond most towns of 6,000 people because we have a number of other businesses besides those related to ag, and of course it's filled with wonderful people and beautiful churches and a community that we have truly enjoyed for many years.
Well, it sounds like a beautiful community, and my understanding is that you have a wonderful nativity scene. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
It is that for sure. There's not another one like it in the world. And we are blessed to have it because 6 German prisoners of war at Camp Algona during World War II built this nativity scene and left it to us.
Now, I don't want to take you off the main topic of the nativity scene, but just curious, how did German prisoners of war end up in Kossuth County in Iowa?
Well, because France and England had so many prisoners, they didn't know what to do with all of them. And so they pleaded with our government to take some, and our government was not in favor to start with, but then they realized that this might be a solution to a huge problem during the war because our men were away fighting a war, and the labor needs here at home were huge.
So how many prisoners of war did you have?
There were 10,000 shipped to Algona.
Wow.
But there were never 10,000 there at one time. And Algona was the base camp. Okay.
Okay, so they
and
were
there were
deployed from
34 branch camps in 4 states. And those 34 branch camps, there were 20 in Minnesota, 10 in Iowa, 2 in North Dakota, and 2 in South Dakota. And the prisoners were shuttled wherever the labor needs were greatest. And they did their thing. And when the labor needs dried up, then they were sent to other camps.
So part of their labor in Algona was to build this nativity.
Actually, the main curator was a man by the name of Edward Kybe, and he built a small nativity set for Christmas of '44. And the camp commander called him in afterwards after he'd seen the first small one. And that one was, the figures were made out of soil, if you can imagine,
really?
and hardened them on the stove.
That's very interesting.
And so the commander called him in later and asked him if he would consider building a larger one. And so the prisoners agreed to do that at their own expense and built this wonderful example of German artistic ability.
It's beautiful.
And there are 60 figures, over 60 figures, and they're made of cement over a wire and wooden frame. And 6 men completed this project in less than a year.
My
Because it was
That's
shown
amazing.
originally at Christmas time of 1945 at Camp Algona.
My
I mean, you
goodness.
have a wonderful brochure here of the whole history and a picture of it, and it is just remarkable.
Now,
I
truly
just
is.
can't- It is.
is
It
this
is.
outdoors?
No, sir.
It's indoors.
It's in a building of its own.
And
yes.
is it
Really?
always set up?
Oh, yes.
It's set up
Oh,
all the
yes.
time. Okay,
and
so
many people call and ask that question, and I
Okay.
simply say the camels weigh 500 pounds each.
my goodness.
Oh,
The human figures are around 100 pounds, and the sheep are like in the neighborhood of 40 pounds. And there's a cow and a burro and so forth. So no, they're not moved.
Wow.
The main viewing time is in December, but the rest of the year, we also host other groups in January through November, and I do most of that myself, and I have other guys on the committee that also help out with that.
well, I was going to say, we were chit-chatting a little bit in the
Sure.
green room, and you said something about a big makeover recently. Can you tell us something about that?
Yes, we were blessed in 2009 to have a former Algona resident whose parents were members of our church, and he was a member of our church growing up, who, when his parents passed away, he said, I want to make it more beautiful. So he stepped forward with thousands of dollars
What a
and
nice
enhanced
gift.
it tremendously
Oh, what a lovely
in 2009.
That's great.
And as time goes by, these cement figures crack and scale and
Oh,
so forth and
I
so
know.
on. So they have to
Sure.
be refurbished
Sure.
from time to time.
I
And
can
we did
understand.
that in 2009.
Now, my understanding is this is very interesting that you also have a museum in Algona
We do, yes.
that was dedicated or based upon Camp Algona. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. And it opened in 2004.
Okay.
And this is operated by a group of people in our community separate from the Nativity.
Okay.
And I am also a member of the museum committee.
Okay.
And we work very closely together because the bus tours come to both places.
Sure.
And when guests come from afar and so forth and so on. So, yes, and it's a wonderful collection of memorabilia from the camp with examples of their artistic ability and examples of all sorts of the aspect of Camp Algona.
I find that really fascinating that someone kept those type of artifacts, because you would think that after the POWs left, that everything would be
Yep.
thrown away.
Well, a lot
That's
of
amazing.
and the prisoners gave some of these as gifts to some of the people in Algona
I see.
because relationships develop, and I don't know how much time we have, but I can tell you one prisoner of war story which is the best example of this statement. They came as enemies and left as friends.
Oh, that's very good.
We learned in 2006, the main man in building the Nativity was a man by the name of Edward Kybe. And Edward, it was truly an act of God that he came to Algona, because without him,
It would have never been
It
done.
would have
That's
never happened.
amazing.
And Edward was the brains of the construction. And for over 60 years, our information has said Edward Kybe and 5 of his friends built the nativity scene.
Now, do you know the names of the other gentlemen?
Well, in 2006, we learned one of them.
Okay.
The other 4 still remain unknown.
Really?
Oh, really?
We got a phone call from a lady in Texas. She'd been on the website at the museum. And she said, my dad, Horst Wendlandt, was one of the other prisoners to help build the nativity scene.
My goodness.
And then she came to visit us and brought newspaper articles about her dad and asked her dad to write his POW story. Can I share it?
Yes. Oh, please.
It's in the brochure too.
Oh, please.
But Horst began with, I don't remember much about being a prisoner at Camp Algona in 62 years ago, but I remember working at the canneries in Blue Earth, and then I started working on a dairy farm over near Lorenz for a Frank Miller. And one day on our trip over there, the truck had an accidente. I was injured in the mouth and couldn't take solid food. So I had to stay at the camp, and that's when I went to Edward Kybe and asked if I could help build the scene. A few days later, when he was well enough, he continued to go to Lorenz, and one morning Frank called him aside and said, our only son has been killed fighting the Japanese in the Pacific. When this war ends, I want you to come back here and be my hired man, and I will treat you as a son, and when I'm gone, I will the farm to you. He wormed himself right into that family. Now, this enemy, remember?
Yes, yes, yes.
Well, it didn't work out that way for Horst, because just like many of the other German prisoners, when they got back to Europe,
They did return then.
all of them had to go back.
Okay.
And there were only 380,000
Okay.
in the country
All
when
right.
the war ended.
Okay.
They all had to go back and be repatriated.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
France and England kept many of them at slave labor for up to 2 years, working in mines and doing all kinds of other things. But again, Horst Wendlandt had an angel over him, because an English doctor took him in, and he had a key to the doctor's house, and the doctor's kids wouldn't go to bed at night until Horst had sung to them.
Oh.
So he wormed his way into 2 different enemy families, and I never got to meet the man, and I've been sorry about that. And anyway, he went before the consulate to make the application to come back to the U.S. and become an American citizen. And the man behind the desk asked, do you want to go to Iowa or Texas? And he said, well, my mother and my sister have already gone to Texas, so we will go to Texas. And the farmer never get mad at me. Sadly, Horst passed a year ago at 97 in Kerrville, Texas.
My goodness.
wow.
What a story. Now, if our viewers or other folks would like to come and visit the Nativity, can you tell us, can you give us some information as to how they would do that, when they would do that?
We open for the month of December. Sundays, we're open from 12 till 9 p.m.
Okay.
And Monday through Saturday from 2 till 9.
Okay.
And the only exception is New Year's Eve. We close at 6.
Okay. And if people want to come to the POW Museum?
Yes, the POW Museum is open weekends 1 to 4.
Okay.
And it'll also be open the week of the 19th to the 23rd each day from 3 to 6. And trying to make it available for people to come to see the Nativity.
Now, the Nativity set is located where?
On the fairgrounds, Kossuth County Fairgrounds, on the south edge of town, just off of Highway 169, and come to the south edge of town, and you'll see signs.
Okay, and at the museum?
Is located on Thorington Street, just south of the courthouse.
Oh, okay.
Well, Marvin, we want to thank you again for being our guest today. It was very delightful to hear about the Nativity scene and also the Algona POW camp. That's great stuff.
Yes.
And folks, we want to thank you, our viewers, for watching the Cocklebur Morning Show, where you all know that we weed out the big stories from throughout Sweet Swine County and beyond. Until next time, bye-bye.
Bye.
Get ready, because now you can see a late-night talk show filmed in front of a discerning yet agreeable studio audience. Split Hoof tonight. Cousin John and his incomparable sidekick, Earl Silo, interview a roster of guests who make appearances that you won't want to miss. Now on this station and the web.